Get 5 coffins ready.
Hey everyone, welcome to my guide for Artio. Artio is a stance switching guardian who is viable in both the solo lane and support role, with the solo lane being the preferred role, so I'll mostly be focusing on solo lane and give a few dribs and drabs here and there about support as we go. Before that though, builds. Support and solo lane are very flexible, as Artio can go into a hyper tanky or full on bruiser build and still feel great. For the most part, support tends to go tankier and solo lane goes into bruiser, but I'm sure you guessed that. The core CDR of Breastplate into Genji's has been a thing forever, and you can essentially just build whatever you like so long as it includes these two CDR/MP5 items. Relics for Artio are largely the same story. She almost always wants Blink, but also benefits from more selfish relics like beads, but is also fully capable of using the full suite of supportive relic options. This is fully up to your discretion, but Blink Shell is a good go-to for supports, and Beads Blink is good for the solo lane. Artio has been a controversial character in SMITE, being extremely hard to kill and with relentless CC on a low cooldown, being a stance switcher and all. That said, from the perspective of the player, she's not only one of the easier stance switchers in the game, she's also one of the prettiest. I mean consistent. Balance and matchup wise anyways. Let's start with her passive. Artio reduces both physical and magical defenses of any enemy gods who take damage from her abilities, up to 6 times for a kinda low but not insignificant 12%. While we're at it though, let's talk about Artio's passive on her stance switch ability. Of course, like all of these stance switch passives, it isn't active until you put a level into it, but once you do, Artio gains a stack of movement speed in MP5 every time she hits an enemy god with an ability. But if you have any experience with stance switchers, I'm sure you guessed that you don't put any levels into this passive until well into the game. These are the definition of background passives and more so encourages and enforces the patented Artio technique of non-stop button mashing. As Artio doesn't have combos as such, rather an entire dynasty's worth of abilities used in every fight and trade. What abilities? Well, I'm glad you asked. In human form, Artio's first ability is a simple cone in front of her, with a short windup that damages all enemies hit. If a god is hit, Artio heals all allies around her including herself for a scaling heal. So this is a very simple follow-up to any of your CC abilities and of course gives your teammates a neat heal on top of that during fights. Of course you do have to resort to using this as wave clear in the earlier stages of the game, but mid to late game it's an amazing trade and teamfight tool. Not a whole lot to it, you can pretty much just flowchart it. If this ability is up and none of your CC abilities are up, just pop it, simple as that. That said though, if you do have CC available to you, it's best to follow that up with your first ability in bear stance. Artio swipes twice, essentially dealing double the damage of her first ability in human form, this time of course foregoing the heal in exchange for more damage. And yeah, again, super simple applications, although this one is a little more focused on being wave clear during the early game. From then on though, just follow up any CC abilities with either of her first abilities in either stance. And if those CC abilities are down and this one is up, just throw it out there to keep your passives up. But alright, let's get into what those CC abilities are, starting with Artio's second ability in her bear form. Artio stuns all enemies around her and increases her projections for 4 seconds. Yep. This, like her first 2 abilities, is one of the most gloriously simple abilities in the game. While the stun is not absolutely instant, meaning it is still interruptible and reactable, in most situations this ability is going to land the instant you intend on it doing so. And hey, even if it whiffs, you still got the protections on you to help you either get out or continue mashing buttons like nothing happened. If I had any tip, learn the range as best you can and put it on instant cast. It'll make playing Artio feel a whole lot smoother, and help you better use it in reaction to enemy players' abilities. Speaking of which, another tip I suppose would be not making it super obvious that you're going for a stun. Other than blink stunning, you usually want to use her other abilities to close the gap, then once this is in range, rather than simply trying to walk up and start a combo with this ability. So let's move on to one that's nearly as simple. Artio's second ability is a neat little AoE around her that cripples all enemies inside of it, as well as reduces their power by a flat percentage. This AoE, as I'm sure you can see, moves with Artio, but more importantly is not cancelled by using other abilities or switching stances. So while popping it and blinking it is a decent, albeit telegraphed approach, a more likely option is using some of Artio's ranged abilities in addition to her wealth of CC to close the gap and then start running at your target. More on that later. For now, all I really had to say is stay deep on your target. Don't let them get even close to the edge of the cripple field because trust me, they are mashing their movement ability to get away from you. Optimal use of this ability is also matchup dependent too, being sure to shut down characters who specialize in using heavy movement. Here's a short list of very important characters you can easily shut down with this ability. So while just plopping this ability down after applying some CC is a totally fine use, timing it perfectly to make the most of the duration will take some time to get used to against various characters. Let's dive into those ranged abilities though, starting with Artio's third ability in her bear stance. Artio dashes forward slowly, damaging and slowing all enemies hit, and is able to lightly steer herself while dashing. So if you hadn't already picked up on it, plopping down your human form too and dashing in is a great way to start off trades against more mobile lane opponents. And of course the slow as well keeps them in place for Artio's slew of damage and follow-up crowd control abilities. Just keep in mind that other than the passive move speed which you may or may not have active, this is Artio's only way out of a fight. So while you do really need to use it aggressively to get the most out of Artio, it can kinda leave you a sitting duck if you use it at the wrong time. Although of course since it does go through all enemies, you can still use it in the midst of a fight for an easy escape as well as self-heal thanks to the slow. Just be wary of any, and I mean any, forms of hard CC which will stop you right in your spot. Don't forget to cancel it as well the instant you hit your intended target, not only to get the optimal follow-up, but also so that it comes back off cooldown sooner rather than later. That said though, if you're already in the midst of dashing and realize, oh, that's a bad fight, canceling is always a better option than trying to just steer your way out of that situation. Usually the follow-up for this is some self-heal with Artio's third ability in her human form. Artio begins emitting a pulsing, damaging AoE in front of her with a long range, this being able to be used over walls. When these pulses hit an enemy, Artio deals damage, heals herself, and slows the enemy for every pulse. If all the pulses hit an enemy, they are rooted. This ability is absolutely excellent as both a combo starter and a combo ender for Artio. You want to start with this ability in situations where you can easily reach your intended target with a bit of wiggle room at the end of the ability's range. Naturally from there, you pulse them until you get the root, pop the cripple, and begin comboing. Of course, this is more effective during the laning phase, but late game as well, if any squishy target walks into your range, you should start firing this ability into their face. As I'm sure you can tell, Artio is not immune to any forms of CC in this ability, so casting it at max range but also knowing when to cancel it and back off is important too. Tanking your targets completely ignoring the ability and just running at you is usually a good tell. You can always just use this mid combo as well though. Remember, spewing out another ability is always preferable to just sitting there basic attacking, and the heal potential on this ability is pretty stellar too, both when it comes to trading and clearing the wave. Oh right, clearing. Leveling up Artio's third ability and hitting every pulse on the wave is the most damaging way to clear the whole wave, but it's lane dependent onto whether or not you're going to want to do this. Typically you don't want to wait for the waves to clash to do this, instead opting just to run straight at the wave before the waves clash, likely prompting your lane opponent to do the same since trading with Artio usually ends in tears. But again, solo lane requires the most matchup knowledge of any role, so it's something you'll learn as you play Artio. So as for combos, I've been sprinkling the basic ones throughout this video, but instead what I'd like to do this time around is show you an old clip of mine while playing Artio, essentially 1v4ing for a little while here while utilizing her abilities fairly well. I'll be slowing down and zooming in places like I normally do during guides, but this is something new I'm trying, so let me know how you'd improve it.
Janice.
So again, let me know what you guys think of including clips like that either from myself or with permission from other players. Or hey, maybe having both is the answer. But I digress, onto ability leveling. You want your 1 at level 1, your 3 at level 2, and your 2 at level 3. From there you typically want to max your 1 over your 3 over your 2, but you can level your 3 over your 1 in situations where you can safely apply the entirety of your human 3, otherwise, sticking to leveling the 1 is a good all-rounder. Then, once you've maxed your first and third abilities, you can put 1 level into your ultimate so that you have the passive, and then level the 2. Now this isn't strictly necessary to do, you can level the 2 and your ultimate alongside one another, and that's fine too, but maximizing that cripple duration in your human form as early as possible is very important. Artio is another funny character to me. All over I see people claiming that Artio is the easiest solo laner in the game, and you can never lose lane with her, and frankly I do tend to agree that she's pretty easy. But then why are her win rates at low levels so abysmal? I think Artio mechanically is very simple once you've warmed up with her and get the general understanding of what abilities best combo into each other quickly and effectively, but switching that effectiveness into the same level of effectiveness in the later stages of the game can be difficult. Artio is hard to kill, but she's not impossible to kill, especially with anti-heal applied, and her CC feels relentless, but it certainly does have its limitations, most of which become apparent when being shut out by more impressive CC abilities, usually from other gods in the Guardian class. So I think proper target selection, as well as knowing when you can finally unleash your all-out torrent of abilities are very crucial, especially the latter. Sometimes I see Artio's late game blink in and spam absolutely everything at their disposal into a squishy, who simply laughs off most of the damage, pop speeds, and lets their support CC them into oblivion. So while it's hard to mess up Artio's never-ending combos, it's easy to tunnel vision with her and overcommit your abilities. Still though, she's an extremely safe laner with crazy strong harass against squishies through the early mid and even the start of the late game, and it's practically impossible to die one-on-one with someone, although she is pretty susceptible to ganks. Just hold your dash until their CC abilities are down and you'll be fine. That's all I have on Artio for now. Thanks for watching.